I swear to defend the freedom, the law, and the lives of the Terran Republic, no matter the danger, no matter the cost, no matter whether they be but one alone or 1 billion strong. President John Brown said, standing there with his wild dark hair blowing in the gentle breeze as he was sworn in by his predecessor, President Taylor. It was a rainy day in the city of Louisville, the capital city first of Earth, then of an empire which now encompassed 50 systems and 35 worlds, the combined total of which included over 90 billion Terrans and then another 9 billion aliens, including the entire conquered species of what was once the Idiaxa Empire, which totaled 7 billion out of that number. The remaining 2 billion was made up mostly of alien refugees, Kana liberation escapees, former slaves whose failed rebellion was televised across their sector of the galaxy. The last 30 million of the Sacred Dark were the only remnants of their once powerful nomadic species. And then there were others who were drawn to the principles of the Terran Republic's representative government, not to mention the security of the Terran fleet, which had suffered only one significant defeat in the last 40 years, after a small fleet wandered unknowingly into the territory of the Sacred Dark. The spirit of the day was positive, the recent victory over the nomads, and their resettlement on the surface of yet undeveloped worlds had eased the fears of mankind that horror was around the corner. Though the memorials that were dedicated to the dead of the bombarded world were somber places, especially to the survivors, the election of Senator John Brown to the presidency was a statement of Terran sentiments that, above all, their liberty must be secured. A sentiment that was redoubled with the understanding that their other neighbors included 2 slave states, a dictatorial religious theocracy, a military dictatorship, and a slew of border worlds where former soldiers had turned into rampaging mercenaries. We are the one bastion of liberty in the galaxy so far, though who knows about those peoples we have not seen. We must protect ourselves from the external threats our neighbors pose. President Brown thought as he left the ceremony. The rain was just starting to come down, and when the band began to play him off, a Marine attempted to hold an umbrella over his head, only for the president to wave it off. No, a leader doesn't stay dry while his followers are made wet. Call for my car, I have a republic to run. He added, and spent the next few minutes meeting and greeting while he waited for the vehicle to arrive. Most people referred to the Terran Republic as simply the Terran Empire, particularly after the subjugation of the Idiaxa territory. But John refused to ever refer to it except by its official name, and when a reporter approached him to ask, "Now that you're president, how will you ensure that the Terran Empire is secure in the way you promised?" John turned his head away from the reporter and spat on the ground in disgust. "We are a republic first and foremost. No matter how large we become, no matter how many wars we win, no matter how many peoples fall under our flag, republic we were, republic we are, republic I will ensure we remain. That is the first way I will secure our people." Spitting in the street whenever he heard the word empire had initially made his reputation, and at first many considered it to be mere grandstanding. But over his 20-year career in public office, the wild-eyed man with the equally wild dark hair had never once wavered in his commitment or his habits. Notably, he authored and sponsored the Xeno Equality Bill, ensuring aliens within the Republic were allowed equal rights under the law, and establishing a grievance board that let them petition for swift court hearings and mixed jury selection to include at least 1/4 aliens of the petitioning species would hear the case. On suggestion that the Idiaxa, as a conquered people whose government had warred against mankind, should be specifically exempted from these protections, John Brown stood at his podium in silence for 68 continuous hours until he collapsed in his own stink and the motion for that condition's inclusion was withdrawn. To say he was popular with aliens and controversial with humans was to say that there was a fair amount of water on Earth. In that spirit, he elaborated upon his answer. "The second way I will secure our people is to ensure that those citizens of ours who travel are accorded proper security against injustice. I will propose migration treaties that provide for the freedom of movement between our peoples, which will include conditions of prosecution, which will hold our respective courts accountable for the trial of our own citizens." As President Brown's vehicle rolled up to where he stood, and his driver stopped to open the door for him, the president took a slow breath. As he was half in and half out of the vehicle, he added one more thing. And of course, in addition, I have not forgotten our lost people, the ones taken by the sacred black. It is true that they may have died in space en route to nowhere, but if they didn't, they will be found and they will be returned home, even if it must come to war to make that happen. With that, the door closed and the car rolled away. Praxa Jean of the Intakana rewatched the interview of the human president again. It was the fourth time watching the human's speech, and it still sent a shiver through the Praxa's body. "Do you think he means it?" he asked of the priest of Ko. "Who can say what the slave races mean or do not mean, save the gods themselves?" High Priest Laksa Jean replied. "What does it matter, brother? Mean it? Do not mean it? We are the Intakana Imperium. We are bound to the Bavragan mercenaries, the divine Lamra with their dozen fleets, and the Catharian mandate. Even if they find that their lost colonists ended up here, which is unlikely since they are deep, deep in the interior working alongside the Kana slaves to replace those we lost, would they really be daft enough to fight a coalition such as ours?" "They funded the Kana," Praxa Jean replied succinctly and spread open his arms. "What fool would give arms to a slave race? Who can say what they would do?" "Nothing so foolish, not after seeing what we did to the Kana who were captured under arms." Laksa Jean shivered with amusement. "It is but an empty bluster. Remember when the Kana leadership promised to burn our homeworld if we did not let their people go? What happened in the end? They burned only themselves." Praxa Jean hummed in thought. It made sense. "We will be cautious anyway. No transporting any human slaves away from frontier worlds far, far from their borders. Death for any human caught with a communication device, and no sale of humans off their existing worlds." "That should be enough, shouldn't it?" Laksa Jean asked with a twitch of his antennae. "I think so," the Praxa replied as comfort settled in upon his soul. "Two can keep a secret, if both of them are dead." That expression ran through President Brown's mind many times as the days of his administration went on, and peace reigned for the first year, the second, and the third. Trade was profitable, and the neighbors of the Terran Republic sought ever closer bonds of friendship. With most, President Brown was enthusiastic as if they were already old friends. But with the Intakana, the Bavragan mercenaries, the divine Lamra with their expansive armada, and the Catharian mandate, his answer was always the same. He stood at the podium and told the whole of the Republic, "Who a man calls friend tells you who he is. Humanity must be a friend only to those who will let all others live freely. We cannot befriend the slaver, or we say that the slaver's choice is as good as ours. We must stand on principle or we stand for nothing at all." He pounded his fist upon the podium, his wrath and anger lit by the outrage in his soul as he recalled the slaughter of the freedom fighters of the Kana Liberation Front. 3 years after their flotillas of survivors escaped into Terran space, they were now well entrenched on a dozen or so worlds, most of them deep behind the border out of fear that their masters might come to reclaim them again. The stories they spread of their lives of bondage kept public opinion with the president, despite special interests arguing that the economic benefit of trading with the Intakana outweighed the morality of refusing to do so. This quiet dislike of the slaver states might have remained just that, except for a certain event. Admiral Pike looked on the view screen in front of her. "What am I looking at, Major?" she asked, while the oblong metal tube continued to rocket onward toward seemingly nothing. "Ma'am, it appears to be a Bavragan mercenary escape tube. They modify torpedoes with propulsion and cryogenic life support systems, and then set out a beacon signal meant to pick up friendly or at least neutral forces and then activate. It's pretty clever, really. But he's a long way from home." The Major glanced up at the mocha face of his admiral. Her lips were pursed as she thought over her options. Her amber eyes, intense in their focus, revealed nothing of her doubtful thoughts. "We're not at war with them, but if this is a criminal, rescuing him might be a problem. According to Terran law, those sentenced to death must be given asylum on a seed world. That means we can't give him back. and there is a fleet of 500 ships across the border that will probably take issue with that. Better to blow this thing apart and pretend we saw nothing." The pragmatic answer was resting comfortably on the tip of her tongue, waiting for her lips to part and give it the chance to be made known to her bridge crew. But she said nothing. "On the other hand, we're obligated to rescue everyone in distress. The self-doctrine demands that we do as we would want done for us." She inhaled and exhaled audibly for several seconds before she abandoned pragmatism and said, "Tractor him in. Let's see who this is and we'll go from there." It wasn't lost on her that half the bridge sucked in their teeth at the compassionate decision. Nobody wanted to fight the Bavragan unless they had overwhelming force, and having overwhelming force meant having at least triple what the Terran Border Patrol now had. She stood up while the glowing blue beam drew the escape pod closer to her ship. "I'm going to meet with our guest. Major, you have the bridge." She didn't wait for any acknowledgement of her order before she left. Her feet clicked and clanked over the metal floor of the Red Dawn. But she heard nothing. A sixth sense had overtaken her mind, something akin to what she felt in the flow of battle, the way she could almost feel the tide turn and know the outcome was foreordained as if by fate itself. The little pod held promise. Who knows what? But I feel like every step is carrying me through the path of history itself. Fuck. I hope it's peaceful. She prayed to the god she'd given up 20 years earlier. Each deck she passed through to the cargo hold redoubled the chills that went down her spine. It should have been nothing but a routine rescue, one made only slightly odd by the trajectory on which the pod was found and the nature of its origins. But her intuition told her it was more. When she reached the cargo bay, a medic was on hand and already working on the cryoreduction process that would safely awaken the passenger. "Is he alive?" she asked, a twinge of shame going through her when she found herself hoping he wasn't. "He is, ma'am, and he'll be awake momentarily," the young medic said, and Admiral Pike held back her frown while she looked at the long-necked alien. He was wearing their military clothing. That much was unsurprising. The vast majority of the Bavragan were enrolled in their military forces, which they then regularly leased to various neighboring states to fight in their wars, even when it meant fighting each other. The eyes, two squares on a blank face, fluttered open. "Welcome to the Terran starship, Red Dawn," Admiral Pike said, and the blank black eyes fluttered again. "Human," he said, and the flaps that lined his body twitched with relief. "I made it. I live. I request political asylum." "Political asylum?" the Admiral asked when she heard the unexpected request. "Yes. I am Captain Lorca Exor, formerly of the Ventress clan, now last of the Ventress clan. My clan is gone, who is not dead, is now among our killers as the fodder ones." His face flaps fluttered in what she vaguely recalled passed for sorrow, and Susan gave him a moment to compose himself before she asked, "Slow down. That's a big ask. I know you must have been through a great deal just to get here, but I can't grant political asylum just on say-so alone, not without extenuating circumstances." She replied to him and set her hands on her hips. "If I did that, every scrap between your clans would send more people our way." His blank pink face flaps opened and closed a few times in rapid succession while he sat up as the cryoreduction continued. "What if I can offer the Terran government something it desires greatly?" Captain Lorca's voice was definitely alien, but even across species, she could detect the note of opportunism in his tone. "I'm listening," she said with a tentative and doubtful expression to match her equally dubious tone. "I can tell you who has your missing people and where they now live as slaves." The captain's answer was enough to freeze both Susan and the medic in place. "Asylum," the Admiral said, "is granted. Tell me everything." "As you wish, Admiral," he replied and rose slowly to begin the final phase of his escape and the next phase of his life in exile.